of the principal barriers to assimilation seems to be the natural tendency of white people to violence. They love violence. They love it as entertainment, the very foundation of their way of life. Death and sacrifice. White people, with almost missionary zeal, have done their best to export death and sacrifice to every corner of the world.
We are not Americans! We are not Americans! We are not Americans! We are not Americans!
Red than dead. Better red than dead.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Melanie, Yazzie, co-host of Red Power Hour. I know it's been a while since we've recorded. We've been trying to, and I don't know, schedules, things. But yeah, we're happy to be back to talk about another movie that we've been cringing. We've kind of actually been procrastinating, I think, with recording this review episode just because we both hate this movie so much. We both had to rewatch it last night. Did not enjoy it at all, but got to do it. Wind River. We're going to review Wind River in this episode of RPH. But before I get carried away with myself, Elena, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, this is Elena Ortiz calling in from Ogopoge Owinge. And as Melanie said, we have been procrastinating because we've been hating on Taylor Sheridan for a long time. Taylor Sheridan and his doppelganger Kevin Costner. And so when I watched this movie's almost 10 years old, 2017. And when I first watched it, I hated it. When I watched it last night, I hated it more for so many reasons. And just like last night, I was kind of raging, and then I calmed down. So I'll probably get raging again. Just so much wrong with this movie, but we'll dive in.
Yeah, I guess. Let's just dive in, then. I don't think we need to have any more introductory remarks. Yeah, so so this movie came out in 2017, and I know that Native folks have really different perspectives on it. I feel like for the most part, it's been received quite well. I forgot which organization it was, but it was either in 2017 or 2018, a group of, I think MMIW advocates actually gave Taylor Sheridan an award for this movie, probably for like bringing awareness to the issue of MMIW. If folks don't know, Wind River is ostensibly about murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. But in fact, I think it's actually about something very different, which I'm sure Elena and I will deconstruct in this episode because it's by Taylor Sheridan and all of his movies are about these particular things. Men, masculinity, the frontier. Anyway, so yeah, the Taylor Sheridan was given an award by a group of, I believe it was mostly Native women advocates for MMIW. I don't know what other kind of accolades or I don't know, just like positive response he received. I wasn't really paying attention maybe back in 2017, 2018. I was still on social media at that time, but I refused to watch this movie. I think it's partly because, at this time, Red Nation was about 4 or 5 years into our existence. We were deep into organizing at that time. And so we were organizing on to end violence, gender and sexual violence against Native folks, not just women, not just cis women, but also LGBTQ2 relatives. And that we saw this as very central to the work that we were doing in border towns and also against resource extraction. And it doesn't make us unique. A lot of people have made those connections. But I think there are 2 reasons why I never wanted to watch this movie. One was I really don't like fictional interpretations about movement stuff that we do in the movement because they're never good. They're always wrong. They're really sensationalist. I think they often cast this movie isn't about movements, but this was my objection for several years. But I feel like, especially movie adaptations or like interpretations of movement work kind of vilify movements, and they also really focus on very few figures, usually men. And so, yeah, I felt like any version of this movie was just going to be really deeply dissatisfying to me politically, but I felt like it was also going to be quite insulting. Turns out it was both. I was right. But last June of 2024, I finally decided to watch it because I was like, enough. I teach this material, like my students reference this movie a lot. Like I'm just gonna suck it up and I'm gonna watch this damn movie. So I watched it for the first time last summer, and then the second time I watched it was last night in preparation for this podcast, and hated both experiences.
And it's, it follows Sheridan's his typical tropes. It's about toxic masculinity. It's about white men. It's about regeneration through violence. It's about conquering the West. And there were so many specific examples. And it's a declension narrative with a white savior, with two white saviors, really.
Yep.
But
a man and a woman.
A man and a woman. I think the story is really about them. The female characters, other than the FBI agent, are completely undeveloped and basically have no to few lines. And I love Tantu Cardinal, and Tantu Cardinal is in this film, and she has like 2 lines, and yet she commands the screen when she's on the screen. Same with Graham Greene, and Gil Birmingham, and so the native actors are window dressing, whereas the white actors are forefronted. One of the things I noticed last night that I hadn't noticed the first time I watched it is, I'm diving right in. So if you haven't seen the movie, it's about a fish and game hunter, basically someone who kills animals who are killing livestock, who discovers the body of a murdered indigenous woman, and turns out that his daughter has also been murdered, who is indigenous because he was married to an indigenous woman, and his ex-wife has, I don't know, half a dozen lines. The mother of Natalie, the murdered woman, I noticed last night, you never see her face. Like, you never meet her. And her father is played by Gil Birmingham, and he is centered because he's the buddy of the Fish and Game, of Jeremy Renner's character. But you only see the mother on a couple of occasions. One time when she's deep in grief and she's cutting herself, and another time when she's in bed and is basically immobile. You don't see her at all. And so you don't see any of the women characters. The murdered woman, Natalie, sidebar, annoying as hell, that this is a woman who has no ties to Native communities. She is not Native at all. And Taylor Sheridan has not only used her in this movie, but also she was in Yellowstone. And I think, forgive me if I'm wrong about this, but when we were talking about Yellowstone, I looked it up, and she is Asian and something else, but she has no indigenous ties to any communities. So he's using this woman as really the focal point of this film, and she's not indigenous. Whereas we know there are so many great indigenous women actors. So anyway, I just got myself completely sidetracked and off my train of thought. So I'm going to shut up.
No, so you listed a number of things at the very beginning. Regeneration through violence, which reminds me of like the frontier thesis that is very common in Taylor Sheridan's work, because he's like very obsessed with the Western as a genre. right? Toxic masculinity, white settler masculinity, just like masculinity, declension narrative. So maybe we can touch on each of those in turn, but maybe we can keep going about the portrayal of women, of Indigenous women. And yeah, I mean, Indigenous women in this film. Okay, so right, so at the very end of the movie, right, it fades to black, and like right before the credits start rolling, there are these two lines, the lines that come up on the screen that are about like the statistics. Like there are no statistics about like, he doesn't use the term MMIW, but it's basically there no statistics or a database exists, you know, telling us how many, you know, Native American women is the term that's used, have gone missing or murdered. And so there's like, you're kind of told at the very end through these lines that this is about MMIW, this whole movie. But the thing is, right, that the Indigenous women who are portrayed, first of all, the one who plays the primary victim of MMIW, Natalie, she's 19. Turns out she was the best friend of Jeremy Renner's daughter, Emily, who you find out a few years ago is also an MMIW, right? She was kidnapped essentially from a party, and they found her body some days later. And so these two best friends are both victims of MMIW. They're both very young. Neither of them has reached the age of 20. But Natalie's played by a non-Native character, a non-Native person. And so that's the first red flag, I think, about the way that Indigenous women are represented. But as you said, Elena, like Natalie's mother, we only see her when she's bleeding, when she's cutting herself because her face is down, and then when she's basically catatonic in her daughter's bed. And the other women, so Emily, the daughter who was passed on, right, the first MMIW that you kind of infer as the movie goes on, Jeremy Renner and his ex-Native wife's daughter, she also has no agency other than in like photos or then like the story of how she died, like her violent death. And even Natalie, so you see like an image of Natalie running through the snow. So the movie is about, right, so Natalie has been raped by rig workers at a man camp at the base of a rig. I don't know if it's on the reservation or off the reservation. And the story is that she ran 6 miles in the snow barefoot to escape because they actually murder her boyfriend because she's dating one of the rig workers, a white guy. And his body is also found in the snow in the course of the movie. And the way that she dies is her lungs kind of burst just because of the cold. The air is so cold that it does certain things to like the vesicles, I think, in your lungs. And so they find Corey, who's Jeremy Renner's character, finds her at like a tree line because, you know, he's like, he knows the land so well because he's the fish and game guy and he's always hunting. And he comes upon her because he's on his like snow machine out doing one of the hunting for some mountain lions that killed some livestock of a tribal member. And so anyway, when you first encounter Natalie, it's through her frozen corpse. So she's half covered by snow. You know, there's like frozen blood coming out of her mouth. And the reason why I'm narrating this is you later on in the movie kind of see the backstory of how she came to be running through the snow in the middle of the night. And that scene also where she gets gang raped. I think she's been gang raped. I remember the first time I saw that, it was really, really hard to watch. And this time around, I almost just like fast forwarded through it because she's supposed to be almost like the protagonist of the movie because it's supposed to be about MMIW, but it's like she's only present in her absence or like in the past, or like she only has agency in her death. And there's something about, or like when she's actually being violated. So the only times you like see her on screen are as a corpse or as being violated or as like in bed kind of after she's like had sex with the white guy, the white rig worker, you know, that she's in a relationship with. And that really disgusts me that if a movie is supposed to be about this issue that is so important to Native women, and it's about like strength and survival and the resilience of Native women, then like if this is how you're going to portray who's supposed the story is actually supposed to center around, there's something deeply disturbing about that. And the thing is like you only get to know her character through mostly Jeremy Renner's narration of her. So he calls her a warrior, you know, he calls her a survivor or something like that. And it's just like bizarre that you have to like the interlocutor for understanding Native women's agency in a movie that's supposed to be about Native women. And this is like Taylor Sheridan does this all the time. Like that interlocutor is a white person. It's a white man, particularly. Because so the movie's actually about Jeremy Renner's character. It's not actually about Native women or MMIW. And he becomes kind of this, again, kind of like a narrator for the Indigenous experience, which is also like utterly bizarre. And in some ways, like the white savior stuff, in some ways, he's like more Indian than the Indians in the movie too. Because he's like a tracker and he's a hunter. And yeah, and anyway, we've seen this a lot in Taylor Sheridan stuff. I think, well, you see this a lot in movies, period, about Native people, but I feel like it's really misleading to claim that this is a movie about MMIW when it's just like really just another movie about like a white dude and his like weird grief or interpretation of what MMIW actually means and represents. And that the actual Native women are, like you said, you don't even see their faces. You just see them getting violated. You just see them getting like raped and beaten, or you just see their dead bodies, or you just like see pictures of them after they're dead. It's actually like deeply disturbing.
It's very disturbing. They're like the Native women are completely erased, and then when you do see Natalie, it's all trauma porn. I mean, it's her in bed with her boyfriend, and because we already know she's dead, so you already know what's coming. So one of the things about Taylor Sheridan as a filmmaker is that there is no nuance. Like, he is not subtle. He has no artistic talent. He is a bull in a china shop. And he's just this macho shithead who elevates other macho shitheads. And like when you see Natalie, she's running. And then you cut to Jeremy Renner's character, and he's out there on his snowmobile, and he shoots a coyote, and he's tracking on this snow machine, and you see him come across this. It looks like a snow angel. And he stops and he gets out. And I noticed when I watched it last night, it is like a snow angel. So it's like where Natalie fell. Mm-hmm. And where her head would be, there's like a halo of blood. And then he moves on so you can see that she crawled to where he finds her. And that's this theme throughout. She ran 6 miles in the snow barefoot. And you keep hearing that. And like you said, he keeps saying she's a warrior. So Native women only have agency in death. And that's like the necrophilic attitude of toxic masculinity, settler toxic masculinity, is this love of death. And this need to regenerate through violence, or to pump themselves up, to remasculinize themselves through death. And that's all you see in this film. And it's almost, when I say Taylor Sheridan has no nuance, like Jeremy Renner's out there as the white savior in a completely white outfit. Okay, I understand. It's snow. It's Wyoming. It's winter. Okay, that's camouflage. I get that. But you've got Graham Greene, who's a BIA cop, and he's not running around in his Frosty the Snowman costume. The guy's wearing like normal clothes. So Sheridan puts Jeremy Renner's character in white. Like, if that's not just a complete blinding, like, this is your white savior, this is the guy. It's just almost humorous how unsophisticated Taylor Sheridan is in his filming. And so yeah, the native characters are like pieces on a chessboard, and they're moved around and used
Yes.
where it's necessary. And
Yes.
so you see Jeremy Renner's ex-wife is Arapaho, so they're on Wind River, and they're Arapaho. And his father-in-law, he takes his son to his father-in-law's, and they have horse, and he's a great character. Graham Greene is there. Tantu Cardinal is there, and they have some great lines. And of course, they command the screen anytime they're on the screen because that's who they are. And they have no agency, no presence in the film at all. But they are there to prove, supposedly through Taylor Sheridan's eyes, that this is a film about missing and murdered Indigenous women. This is a film about Native people. And it's not, like you said, it's a film about white saviors. It's a film that is supposed to convince us that the FBI gives a shit and does anything about missing and murdered Indigenous women, which we know they don't. And it completely detracts from the fact that all statistics, all work, all research, all legislation, all anything that has gotten press for missing and murdered Indigenous women has been a result of the work of activists who are 99.9% Indigenous women, LGBTQ, Two-Spirit, and have nothing to do with the FBI or with white fish and game at all. And so it's infuriating. And I think a lot of Native people did embrace this film, but a lot of Native women also said, the FBI never made any effort to solve missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls cases. And almost all of the work was done by Indigenous women. And Taylor Sheridan then came there's two other things too. One is that proximity to sexual predators. This film was distributed by Weinstein before Harvey Weinstein got arrested and thrown in jail for being a sexual predator. This film was distributed by Weinstein, and Taylor Sheridan did his best to separate from that.
2017, Me Too was well underway in 2017 when this film came out. Yeah. And Weinstein had been named, I think it was right because Me Too was corresponded with Trump's first term. And so, gosh, I forgot about that.
Yeah. And then Sheridan, yes, he did get some award. I can't remember what award it was, but then he tried to claim credit for the renewal of the Violence Against Women Act. And he went on media and said that, that his movie, that Wind River, was instrumental in ensuring that the Violence Against Women Act was re-upped. And that's when I think Rebecca Nagel came out and said, no, you do not get to claim that. How many Native women have worked behind the scenes for years to ensure that happened? But he did ultimately get smacked down by, Illuminative for sure, Rebecca Nagel. And, it's just like a man, particularly that kind of a man, to try to take credit for something that I think he really had no idea what he was doing. He wanted to make a film, a neo-Western,
Mm-hmm.
and murdering women is basically what he does. Murdering Native people is what he does. That's what he likes to do. And he likes these white male characters, the strong, silent type, who, have suffered loss in their lives. And so he elevates this sort of Western hero, at the expense of everyone around them, at the expense of the land, at the expense of Native people, at the expense of everything. He never makes the connections between man camps and violence against women. He never makes the connection with extractive industries and the deterioration, or the struggle of life on the reservations. And there's, he's just stupid. Like, he's just completely unaware of the reality of Native people, of the reality of Native lives. And he actually claims he went to Lakota reservation. I can't remember where he went, maybe Pine Ridge, to study indigenous cultures so that he could better write the screenplay. He wrote this, he produced it, and he directed it. And you can
Yeah.
tell because it's the most toxic masculine movie ever. And he doesn't have any understanding of indigenous culture at all. He makes it cardboard and one dimensional, and it's no better than John Ford. It's just prettier. And that's where my rage started coming out, was just, you have no fucking idea what it's like. And there's a quote that I wrote down, when they get to when Jeremy Renner is talking to one of the rapists, murderers, and he says, "You have no idea what life is like here. There is nothing here but the snow and silence." And Jeremy Renner says, "These people were forced here. Snow and silence are the only things that haven't been taken from them." And I thought, how absolutely fucked up is that? Like, if that is what Taylor Sheridan thinks of Native people, but in particular of Wind River, like, he has no idea of culture and the struggle to retain community, and the really overwhelming, I think, beauty of that land. Because I've been through Wind River, and it is gorgeous. Like, yeah, it's cold. I have not been in there in the winter, but it is gorgeous land. It's not snow and silence. It is so much more. But that's all that he sees, because people like Taylor Sheridan only see what you can take from the land, and not the people who are actually part of the land. And it's those kind of nuances that escape him, to the point where I just want to, remove him from the earth and say, you have no business telling our stories. And he doesn't. And we all know that. And we've all said that before. So I'll shut up now.
Put him on one of those shuttles to the colonies that they're trying to build in space, or on one of those expeditions to Mars that the billionaires are trying to organize.
Let's send him to Mars, and you can see how silent it is up there.
I mean, everything I feel like that's such a mic drop. I don't even know what to add to that, because it was so fucking perfect. I mean, we're trying to drive a point home that we've already made, or feels obvious, but because we've watched and reviewed quite a few of Taylor Sheridan's things, his TV shows and his movies, and there are no politics to his creative work. Right. And you're right. He wrote, produced, and directed this movie. So we're basically seeing Native people, and particularly Native women, through the eyes exclusively of Taylor Sheridan in Wind River. And there's no awareness at all of gender. Which again, I feel like is kind of like a no shit kind of thing because of how he is. He's Taylor Sheridan basically writes movies about himself, which is something that we have seen repeatedly from him. He's very obsessed with seeing himself as the rugged individual, right? The rugged man who's like fashioning and refashioning himself and his masculinity on the Western frontier. Because he gives all these, right, Jeremy Renner is essentially Taylor Sheridan. Like, this is who he's basically him in the movie. So the movie's really just about Taylor Sheridan. It's just this like solipsistic bullshit. And so if we shouldn't really be trying to understand this movie or pretty much anything else in his like oeuvre in any different way. But obviously what is like most enraging that Wind River is really just Taylor Sheridan like circle jerking himself on screen is that it's supposed to be about MMIW. And that is like so profoundly insulting. Like, there's like no point in even going even harder about it because it's so obviously insulting. And so he's always like very invested in, there's always a white male protagonist who kind of like, we view the world through this figure. It's the cowboy, right? Like you were saying, the Western hero. And Jeremy Renner is no different, right? He's a tracker. He's a hunter. He has in some sense like mastered the land. And from what you can tell with how it's narrated in the film, has an even closer, more intimate relationship with the land than the Indians do, right? Because pretty much the entire film, you just see Jeremy Renner out on the land. He's like out on the land doing his thing, right? There's like this trope about Native people being excellent hunters and trackers, that you see kind of throughout the history of American cinema. And instead of the Indians doing that, like a Native man doing that in this film, it's Jeremy Renner, right? And his grief over the loss of his Native daughter, right? Because his ex is a Arapaho, she's an Arapaho woman. It's like Taylor Sheridan, if we're understanding Taylor Sheridan narrating himself through the character of Corey, Jeremy Renner's character's name is Corey. It's like Taylor Sheridan insinuates himself into indigeneity also through this character, which is also really sick. I mean, this is what like pretendians do. So there's like some of that's also kind of floating around, I think, that felt like that was kind of what was also going on in this film. And so Jeremy Renner is white, but his daughter is Native, and she is, now one of the statistics, the MMIW statistics. And so somehow we are supposed to think of Jeremy Renner as like one of us. Like if you're a Native person watching this film, you're like, oh, he kind of like ceases to be white, essentially, like the markers of who he actually is. And he wheezes himself at one point during the film as well. They're trying to find out who was murdered, Natalie. And there's a trailer with a bunch of, I think they look like maybe they're on meth, a bunch of tribal members, young Arapaho, maybe Shoshone Arapaho men. They're known to be troublemakers. The Little Feathers, I think is the name. And the son, Natalie's brother, actually Natalie's younger brother, Gil Birmingham's son, he's an addict and he's like in this trailer, up to no good or whatever, with this group of other addicts, from what I can tell, who are all young men, Native men on the res. So this crazy violent scene ensues. We should talk about that too, where they actually kill one of the young Native men and try to pretend like it's not a big deal. Like Elizabeth Olsen, who plays the FBI agent, her name is Jane. The character's name is Jane. She just like murders one of the Native men. And it's like, it's not even a big deal. And I'm like, that's illegal. And then they kind of like don't report it. Anyway, we can talk about that later. The violence, the amount of violence, we're going to have to talk about the amount of violence in the film. But Natalie's younger brother is like then taken in by the police, right? And at some point during this complicated scenario and series of events at this trailer that they've raided essentially in the search for Natalie's killer, Jeremy Renner has a conversation with her younger brother. And Jeremy Renner says, like, what does he say? This is the moment when he wheezes. I actually wrote this down. Sorry about the little noise with the pages. He wheezes himself. So basically he is claiming that he's basically part of the tribe, right? He's Arapaho or Shoshone. And then Natalie's brother shoots back at him and he says, "What's this wee shit, man?" He's like, "The only thing native about you is your ex-wife and the daughter you couldn't protect." Yep. And then Jeremy Renner gets really violent with him and basically assaults him while he's handcuffed in the back of this cop car. And that's the only moment in the film where you see a Native person push back, like very clearly and precisely, against kind of like the vibe, right? It's never clearly stated that Jeremy Renner is like kind of sees himself as Indigenous, but then it's like always implied. It just kind of floats around in the film that he's like more Indigenous or than the Indigenous people, or that he's basically been adopted, because he uses the term family, my family, when he's talking about Native folks in the film. And so Natalie's younger brother is the only Native person who pushes back against this kind of like the narrative that looms large, essentially, within the film that, Jeremy Renner, aka Taylor Sheridan, is actually Indigenous. It's the only like conscious moment where you see that happen. But everything else that Jeremy Renner says or what he does really implies that he has become Indigenous, essentially through marrying and having children with this Arapaho woman, through having his own daughter, disappear and then being murdered. He knows everyone really closely. He knows, he's a part of the tribe, essentially.
He talks to Natalie's brother instead of Graham Greene's character, who's actually the BIA chief of police. It's Jeremy Renner, whose character is always talking to the Native people like he somehow has more of an in than someone who's actually from there and who's actually Indigenous, which I found really bizarre.
Yep. But it's like he has more knowledge of the land and more knowledge of the community and more knowledge of the culture than the Indigenous people. Yeah. That opening scene with his son, he goes to his ex-wife's house and picks up their son. And then he's teaching him how to like ride a horse. And whatever. I grew up around horses. So anyway, so he's like teaching him how to ride a horse. It's like really basic shit. Like it doesn't matter if you're Arapaho or you're like a white cowboy. Okay. Like horse skills are horse skills. And maybe those are fighting words. I apologize. But at the end of this scene, right? So his son is Native. His son is actually Arapaho. And his son says something like, "Oh, did I do that right?" Or is like, "Is this like he says, "Is this the cowboy way?" And then Jeremy Renner's like, "No, son, that's the Arapaho way." And he's the one who's just taught him how to ride this horse in the Arapaho way. The white father just taught his Arapaho son how to ride a horse in the Arapaho way. And that's just like one out of probably a dozen of these kinds of like moments in the film where like Jeremy Renner is like clearly like he's basically more of a Native man than the actual Native men. Because even Gil Birmingham's character, the very last scene of the film, you see Jeremy Renner come back to the house where, and so Gil plays the father. His name is Martin. The character's name is Martin of Natalie, right? The young 19-year-old Arapaho woman who has been raped and murdered. He finds Martin sitting in their backyard of the house, and Martin has painted his face blue and white. Kind of like Braveheart. Anyway, he kind of look like Braveheart. But so Jeremy Renner comes back and he's like, "Hey man, like, why's your face painted that way?" And Martin says something to the effect of like, "This is my death face." And he's like, I just did this because I didn't know what I was doing because there's no one left to teach me. And so that's his last line, I think, of the entire film. And so then the camera pans out into the back, like Gil or Martin is sitting right next to Jeremy Renner. Clay or Corey, whatever, they're sitting there, and then like it fades to black, and then the stuff about MMIW statistics comes on the screen, and then the credits roll. And I was just like, are you kidding me? The very last line of a Native character in this film is a declension narrative. It's basically like, we've lost. Look at everything. I don't even know who I am as an Arapaho man. And that's why I'm sitting here looking so ridiculous with my face painted. And
Yeah,
it's
and will
just,
you sit with me, you white man, because you're more
yeah,
native than I am?
exactly. Yep.
Uh,
You know more about this than I do. Like it's actually really disgusting.
yeah. Yeah.
There's a deep hatred for Native people, I guess, for lack of a better way of understanding it, that I feel like I've seen so many times. Um, but yeah, for a movie that's supposed to be about MMIW, like Taylor Sheridan sure does hate Native people. He it's the classic syndrome, settler syndrome, where it's like he wants to play Indian, but at the same time, the playing Indian is always coupled with like violence, like incredible violence towards
Yeah.
Native people.
Yeah, he wants to be Indian, but he has to kill all the Indians in order to achieve that. And the same with women. Like, it's supposed to be a film about women, about murdered and missing Indigenous women, but all of the women are basically rendered completely passive, dead, or without agency. And even, as an FBI agent, um, Jane is really completely inept. When she arrives, she's come from Las Vegas, from some convention in Las Vegas. She's in the middle of Wyoming in the dead of winter with, a windbreaker on, and the Tantu Cardinal has to dress her so that she won't freeze her ass off as they go to inspect the body, Natalie's body. But then she really, at every turn, is completely inept. She kills the Native man in the trailer. Just a brutal scene, and
It really is
it's just
gratuitous.
gratuitous. Yeah, exactly. And it seems to just, like, you blink and nothing is ever said about it. Like, wow, did you have to fire 18 shots into this guy? And then at the very end of the film, when they have the shootout with the oil rig workers, everyone else dies, but she crawls under the trailer and Jeremy Renner has to save her as well.
Even Graham
So,
Greene dies. I was like so
yeah,
pissed.
yeah, that was fucked up. But I mean, the amount of violence and the amount of violence that Sheridan feels like he needs to show is astounding. Like, you can do a film about rape and about this topic without being so gratuitous, without showing the violence. There are ways of doing it, and filmmakers who can do it. First of all, Taylor Sheridan should never be telling Native stories ever, period, end. But he shouldn't be allowed to have Native characters in his films. Every Native actor should boycott, and I know that's unreasonable because our folks need to work too. But, like, he is so disgusting. And the amount of violence, I couldn't watch the rape scene again. I watched it the first time I saw the movie, and last night I had to fast forward. I just couldn't do it. And every one of those men was, interestingly, I agree with you that Jeremy Renner's character is Taylor Sheridan, but I also think every one of the men in that trailer, the rapists, are also Taylor Sheridan. And that's who he is as a human being. Mm-hmm. And not only, in the end, not only does every single one of them die, but all of the quote unquote good guys die also. The only one that lives is Jeremy Renner, aka Taylor Sheridan, and the white savior counterpart. And she has to survive because she's the eyes of the audience. She is who we are supposed to relate to. And the very last line that she says, and she's lying in the hospital bed and she's crying and he's there, and she says again, repeats him, she ran 6 miles in the snow. And like, that's what we're supposed to remember about Natalie, is only her death, not what her life meant, not, the gratuitous violence of the oil rig workers, or, the devastation that her death wreaks on her family. And it's interesting because I, thank Creator, have never had to deal with a younger person in my family pass away by violent means, but I have been part of gatherings where it has happened. And when that happens, the house is surrounded by family and community, and everybody is coming in and everybody is bringing food and everybody is there and everybody is helping the family. And like, I don't think Taylor Sheridan gets that when something like this happens, your family and your community come together. And so he shows that family. He shows Gil Birmingham and Martin. And I don't even remember the mother's name. I don't know if we even knew the mother's name.
We don't know. I know.
Yeah, but there's no family there. Where is her family, and where is their family? And Jeremy Renner seems to be the only one that visits. And that also struck me as like, I've never seen a death or someone passing away, violent means or non-violent means, like your family always shows up. And Taylor Sheridan just has like no idea what Native communities, what they operate like, what standard
he doesn't care
behavior. He doesn't care. He wants to isolate. So he wants to isolate Martin and the unnamed wife, to elevate Jeremy Renner as not only the white savior of the film, but also Martin's only friend.
Yeah.
And the one who'll sit with him when he's dressed up like Braveheart.
Yeah, I mean, there's no sense of community. Like, there's no, the camera, like the cinematography, there are a lot of these like really beautiful panoramic shots of the landscape and of the land itself, but there's no panning out to see like the indigenous community. There's no panning out to see what the res actually looks like, where there's like housing or how people live. It just, again, it's very bleak. That's actually what it is. The narrative about Native people is extremely bleak. And something you said earlier really stuck with me, right? So it's because of how Sheridan narrates Natalie. So the very first scene, you hear Natalie speaking, and I think it's a poem or something that Emily wrote. Or maybe it's Emily speaking it. I'm not really sure. And then you see Natalie running. So the very first scene of the film is you just see Natalie running, but you have no explanation for why she's running. And so, of course, then you find out, then the film is like telling you why you see her running in the very first scene. But then towards the end of the movie, when you flash back and Taylor Sheridan finally decides to tell you what happened, like what led up to her running and then what led to her death as she was running. And you said, Elena, you watch that scene knowing that she's already dead. You watch that scene knowing what has already happened to her. And that right there, I think, is like how Taylor Sheridan sees Native people in a nutshell. Meaning, right, so Jeremy Renner calls her a warrior, right? And Elizabeth Olsen's character, her very last words as she's in the hospital bed are like, she ran 6 miles in the snow. And it's like, okay, so you're saying that she had this like heroic strength, a will to live. This Natalie, this 19-year-old indigenous woman had such a strong will to live, but that didn't even matter because she was already dead.
Yeah.
And that right there is really like Taylor Sheridan's understanding and interpretation of Native people. Man, they seem to have a pretty strong will to live, but they're already dead.
Yeah, that's
You know,
like
at
the
the
ultimate declension narrative.
it's the ultimate declension narrative. And so,
Yeah.
and you see that it's peppered through the rest of the movie too. Like, you know, when they raid the Little Feathers trailer and they apprehend Natalie's little brother and they kill, you know, like one of the other addicts that he's with, the young Native guy in the trailer. You know, there's also this moment, gosh, I just lost my train of thought. What was the declension narrative? Oh, Jeremy Renner says, like, Elizabeth Olsen, right? Because she's brand new. She's like this, like you said, she's like this she's young. She's never been to the res before. You kind of see this as maybe one of her very first like field experiences as an FBI agent. So she's just like really green and everything. Her eyes are always wide and she just like doesn't know what's going on. And so Jeremy Renner explains to her, you know, after they've raided the trailer, about prison, like, and about these like young Native men going to prison. And he's like, well, everyone here is used to it. It's basically a rite of passage. They even look forward to it, you know. And he's just talking about how like, yep. And so it's like and even Natalie's younger brother, when he confronts Jeremy Renner for weeing himself into like the indigenous collective, he's high. He's an addict. So even like that young Native man, and the way that even his father has talked about him earlier on in the film, when Martin is his father, is talking to Jeremy Renner's character when he comes over to the house to ostensibly tell them like they found Natalie's body. They speak about her younger brother so disparagingly. Like Martin actually says he is already lost to us, if I recall. And so this character is already lost to his own kin, this young indigenous man. He's an addict. He's like living in a trailer with these quote unquote criminals, right? And then he's going to prison, basically. By the end of the film, he's going to prison. And this is the Native subject who has enough agency to tell Jeremy Renner to essentially fuck off and stop calling himself Native. And so even in the only moment in the film where a Native person challenges this entire fucked up narrative that has been, you know, unfolding during the film about basically like pretendianism, and even that character doesn't have agency in the eyes of Taylor Sheridan, because Taylor Sheridan wrote all of these characters. He's already compromised. He's already lost. So it doesn't even matter. Like, what's the point in a Native person who's completely lost already trying to tell this like white savior man, you know, Jeremy Renner's character, to stop insinuating himself into the indigenous collective? We don't even need to take that character seriously. He's just high. Yeah. He's just angry. There's another thing I noticed inside that trailer that really pissed me off. The graffiti on the wall. And so you see the graffiti on the wall. So Elizabeth Olsen and Graham Greene come to the entrance of this trailer, the Little Feather trailer. And Graham Greene has warned her that this is like a bad batch. Like this is a really rough thing and you should be careful, right? They kind of have they're ready to draw their guns. And the young Native man who answers I think a Little Feather, he bear sprays them, right? And so then after that, Elizabeth Olsen kind of recovers and she decides to enter the trailer. You know, her gun is drawn. She's having a hard time seeing things. And so you're kind of seeing the trailer as she's like stumbling through to see if there's anyone else left inside. And so you see the graffiti on the wall as she's passing a wall from like the main area back into where the bedrooms are. So it's the only way you only see the graffiti because of her. And one of the graffitis says, I think it was, "We've always killed cowboys." It says that. And then there are pictures of like, maybe like Sitting Bull. There are pictures of like Indians on the wall inside that trailer. Yeah, "We have always killed cowboys" is something that the graffiti says. And that's the only, that vignette within the larger film is the only time you see indigenous resistance. It's the only time you see it, of any kind of like powerful kind. Whether it's Natalie's younger brother telling Jeremy Renner, like, "What's this wee shit? Like, you're not Native. The only thing Native about you is your ex-wife and the daughter you couldn't protect," right? Or this graffiti that says, "We've always killed cowboys." Or these photos of like the heroes of indigenous resistance, let's say of like the 19th century. And what Taylor Sheridan is telling us, like that version of indigenous masculinity that is tied to any kind of demonstrable resistance, is we're supposed to see it as corrupt, criminal, violent, crazy. I mean, the trailer is torn apart because it's basically like a bunch of meth heads living in this trailer. So the trailer doesn't even have windows in some places. It's completely destroyed on the inside. And I mean, again, metaphor, it's like any native people are completely destroyed on the inside. And even any kind of like real resistance or like any kind of like piercing through the very settler narrative that dominates this film with any kind of anti-colonial consciousness or a critique of colonialism, period, is portrayed as insane. Actually.
And there's an inference that Natalie was running for her brother's trailer because it was the closest place to where she was assaulted.
Yep.
And it was just over the ridge. And so that, after being violently attacked and raped by these oil rig workers, she gets away because they're killing her boyfriend. And she runs, and she's running. The only safety that, the closest safe place that she has is her brother's trailer, which is filled with meth heads. And those are the only other native characters. So all the native characters in this are either traumatized or they're addicts. And you don't see you just don't see anyone else. There's like no everyday people living their lives. You see Graham Greene for a very short time on the screen, and he is always pushing Jeremy Renner forward to, oh, you help the FBI agent. Oh, you're the hunter. You help. And that's all you see him do. He's like removed. He's like window dressing and background material. And the best line, indigenous line in the whole thing was from Natalie's younger brother when he has that confrontation with Renner, which is interesting. But yeah, Natalie was running to him. She also seems, Martin said that he didn't know who her boyfriend was. So the parents didn't know, but the brother knew. So the meth head knew. She talked to him. So he was in the best place to help her. And so it's like a dead end. She was running for her brother's place, which, according to Taylor Sheridan, is just this dead end trailer of death.
Yeah.
So she was already dead. Even if we remove the assault, what he's saying is that she was dead from the moment she was born.
Literally. And he kind of is saying that about a lot of the characters. All of the young Native men who are in the meth trailer, does the exact same commentary about them too. It's kind of insinuated about Jeremy Renner's own Native daughter. She was just like, they're already dead.
Yeah.
It is nihilistic. And again, man, if you're going to portray Native people as already dead, man, they sure do fight hard, but it doesn't matter because they're already dead. They're already dead or they're dying. They're born just to die is kind of the commentary, which sounds like a stupid line from a Western I probably heard at some point anyway. That's just Indian hating. That's just good old fashioned Indian killing and Indian hating. And that is what this fucking movie is about. That's what all of Taylor Sheridan's movies. And they're not about Indians. I don't think Taylor Sheridan actually gives a shit about Native people. Like, he includes Native people because he's really obsessed with like the Western as a genre. And so you can't have a genre. You can't make a neo Western without having Indians or like the theme of indigeneity in it. Which is why Native people are like window dressing and such, like just props, kind of like old school, like kind of classical Westerns. But yeah, and because it's a Western, and because who Taylor Sheridan is, it's really just a story about settler colonialism. Like that's really all this movie or any of his movies are about. It's just like the glorification of settler subjectivity, particularly settler masculinity, white settler masculinity, which is why there's so much violence in all of his films, because white settler masculinity is regenerated primarily through violence. And so that's really what Wind River is about. It's just a bunch of like settler nonsense.
It totally is. And I forgot also at the very beginning of the movie, because of course it always disturbs me when, and I understand Native people have livestock and need to protect their livestock. And certainly we come from that down here with sheep and all that. But the very first image in the movie is Jeremy Renner shooting Ma'i. And of course that just pisses me off.
It pissed me off too.
And then he's tracking, and then there's this weird, like, sort of underlying, very minimal storyline about tracking the mother cougar with her 2 cubs, and because they've killed a steer that belonged to his father-in-law, and he makes the comment, "Oh, you're teaching your kids to hunt, but you're teaching them on a steer. Now you've killed all 3
your
of
entire
you."
family or something like that.
The entire family. And then you're supposed to get some sort of a redemption arc, because at the end of the film, when he's tracking the final rapist who got away from the massive shootout, he comes across the lion's den and he sees the mama cougar with her 2 cubs, and he doesn't kill them. So you're supposed to get this sort of redemption arc, like he has recognized that they should be allowed to live, as he's stalking the white man who clearly deserves to die. But that was very weird. It was a very weird sort of subplot story arc, weird thing. And then the other thing I noticed is that as he's out there with this final rapist, there's like some talking, some words, some chanting going on, and I couldn't understand it. I rewound it a couple of times, but I didn't quite get what was being said, but it was almost like he was listening to the wind or something like that. And it was very, very weird. And he you're supposed to respect him because he gives the final rapist the same opportunity. I'll give you the same opportunity you gave Natalie. And the guy makes it about 15 feet and then just dies. And you see him juxtapositioning that she was a warrior. This guy only made it 15 feet. And so I'm sure all of the I don't know, I could be wrong, but like all of the white women in the audience are going, yeah, the woman was much tougher. And the white men are going, yeah, he was a rapist and he fell apart and blah, blah, blah. But basically all it means is she was dead from the start, and he at least lived through the entire movie. Like we never saw her. We never got to know her. We got to know the rapist better than we got to know Natalie.
You know what? You're 100% right. We got to know the rapist better than we got to know Natalie. God, it's fucked up, man. He actually makes the whole speech before he, right? So he apprehends the rapist. who's survived the big shootout that's happened at the man camp out at the rig, which I would actually like to talk a little bit about before we wrap up. But so he apprehends him. He passes. He cold cocks him, and then he like wakes up, and they're on top of a mountain. And this is where Jeremy Renner gives him the opportunity to confess, his crimes. And then Jeremy Renner like sets him free, and is like, that's when he's like, I'll give you the same opportunity Natalie had. If you can make it to that highway that's like 6 miles away or something, then you get to live. This is where Jeremy Renner gives the speech about how Natalie was a warrior. Like, that's a warrior. He's like, that's a warrior. That's a warrior. Earlier on in the film, he calls her a fighter. And so there's all, God, where was I going with this? I'm so sorry. Right. Well, that's where he's calling her a warrior. And right, there's like what you were saying, there's the juxtaposition between Natalie, who's like this tough as nails woman, and then this like weak ass man, right? Who, yeah, he makes it 15, 20 feet before his lungs explode. And Natalie made it 6 miles. And so there is through like the Taylor Sheridan brain, there is a commentary on gender, but it's the commentary on gender is really just about liberalism, a certain kind of liberalism, a toxic kind of liberalism that is that rugged individualism that is very at the core of like the American national identity. It's a kind of hyper individualism that is played out, I think, within the imaginary, the American imaginary, mostly in like Westerns. Like, this is why Westerns are such like a coveted and beloved genre of the American cultural tradition, I guess, for lack of a better term. And there are other moments in the film. So, for example, one of the rapists, one of the man camp, one of the rig workers, he calls Elizabeth Olsen, who's the FBI agent, she's a white woman, he calls her character spunky. And he's like, damn, these women out here sure are spunky, I think is what he says. And you also, during the scene where, Natalie, what we find out, like, Natalie was running from, she fights back physically. She fights for her man because she can tell he's being brutalized by this other group. They're all drunk. This other group of his quote unquote friends who also work on the rig. And so she fights back for herself. And like, you kind of get the sense that when she runs, that's a sense she's fleeing, but she's also fighting for her own life. So basically she's having to fight for her own life. So the whole narrative there is that she was also, this is kind of a twisted thing to say, but I'm not saying this is actually what the film is saying, that she's also like spunky. And so you get the sense when, the standoff is happening and the shootout happens, when the FBI and the county sheriffs and the BIA cops, they all come together like as a law enforcement posse to go confront the oil rig workers, essentially to go to try to find like where this incident, like the rape, took place out at the rig. And the leader, like the manager, I guess maybe, of the entire crew out there, he's the one that makes this comment of like, damn, the women out here sure are spunky. And you get the sense that he's also referring back to like Natalie, because Elizabeth Olsen, when she's confronting them, they're all fucked up. Like, they have bruises and abrasions on their face because Natalie and her boyfriend like were defending themselves, right, during this like very brutal physical altercation. So you just get the sense that he's also referring to not just Elizabeth Olsen, but he's referring to Natalie and calling her spunky. And the reason why, sorry, I'm spending a lot of time on this is there's only a few moments in the film when women, whether they're Native women or white women, get to have any kind of like proximity to strength, an agency that might be understood as strong. And it's through Natalie being a warrior and a fighter. It's through Jane and Natalie being spunky. And it's the very last monologue that Jeremy Renner's character gives in the film when he's meeting up with Jane as she's in the hospital bed recovering. She gets shot in the confrontation out at the man camp. And he says, Jane, you're a tough woman. You saved your own life. And she says, it was luck. She's like, actually, I was just lucky. And then he says, luck don't live out here. It lives in the city. I'm paraphrasing because he said another few, I don't know, weird Western white man words. But luck don't live out here. It lives in the city. Out here, you survive or surrender. You fought for your life and you get to go home with it, or something to that effect. And so this is also one of the other moments in the film where you hear commentary on like femininity, but it only gets to exist in proximity to this like rugged masculinity. So it's like if you can mirror this rugged masculinity, if you can demonstrate strength and toughness, spunkiness, if you have fight, then you'll survive, is basically what he's saying. But that's not true because the only one who survives is the white woman. The Native women don't survive because, you know, and that's obviously the difference. That's the racialized difference between those two populations. Native people are already dead. They're born to die. But white women have a fighting chance. Anyway.
Well, and when Jane first gets there and she goes to Tantu Cardinal to help get dressed appropriately for going out in the snow, Tantu Cardinal dresses her in her dead granddaughter's outfit. And when she walks out, everyone, well, Jeremy Renner and his son do this double take. Like there's a photograph of Emily dressed in the exact same outfit. And so there's a clear foreshadowing right there that something's going to happen to Jane that happens to Emily. But Jane gets to survive it because she's not already dead. Exactly what you just said.
And Jeremy Renner saved her life.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Like, Natalie's brother literally is like, the only thing Native about you is like your ex-wife and the daughter you failed to protect. Who's Native? Right. The Native woman you failed to protect. And
but
then,
he protects the white woman.
But he protects the white woman. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, there is so much fucked up about all of that and everything. You know, there's nothing really redeeming about that movie at all. I couldn't even really enjoy the scenery, which I think is beautiful, because I was so angry about this film and about everything that Taylor Sheridan claimed and everything he puffed himself up about, and that critics loved this movie. And it's just another example of, you know, it's all okay if the Native people are all dead, because that's what the world already thinks. And, you know, it just shows with white filmmakers, not Native filmmakers or content producers, but the medium and the message from John Ford to Taylor Sheridan has not changed. Mm-hmm. And people need to stop consuming this content and need to put an end to this, because it is damaging to Native people. It's damaging to Native communities to see this kind of thing shown on screen. And I just, not that it's going to do any good, but fucking Taylor Sheridan needs to stop making movies with Native people.
Said this multiple times.
Yeah. And people need to stop consuming them. And we need to be elevating Native voices. We need to be elevating Native artists. And this kind of thing, you know, it's never going to end, because it's just this vicious cycle of, you know, the techniques and the pictures get prettier, but the message is all the same. This is just like, you know, any of those 1930s to 1950s Westerns.
I agree. Yeah. Neo-Western, I think is the correct word. It's like when people talk about neo-colonialism, and it's like, I mean, it's just colonialism repackaged. Yeah. Maybe with some technology these days, mass surveillance. I don't know, but yeah, the neo-Western is pretty much just, and it's the same shit, and it's so unimaginative. And that's what you say, like, there's no nuance in how Taylor Sheridan tells a story. There's no nuance in Westerns. Actually, I would kind of love to see. I think we've talked about this before, but like an anti-Western Western, wouldn't that be cool and imaginative, like an indigenous futurisms kind of approach to a Western? Or I guess it would have to be like a non-Western because I don't think you can redeem the Western. I'm not. I don't think that can happen. Yeah, and
You
it's
could
just like a
satirize
blunt.
it.
Yeah, you could satirize it. That'd be so entertaining and so smart. Like an indigenous satirization of Westerns, which those things exist like in certain forms. I'm not saying that those haven't been written or narrated, but yeah, like the Western as a genre is just so clunky. It's like a blunt force object. It's just so uninteresting. And there's no creativity to it. It's just the same thing over and over again. And yet that also describes, I think, a lot of American pop culture. I mean, that's why they remake things from the 90s now. Like there's just no imagination. It's just the same shit over and over again. What do they call that? Like same shit, different font or something like that. But yeah, it would just be, wouldn't it just be so like satisfying to watch a good movie? Like just something that was about indigenous people.
Yeah.
That wasn't full of stereotypes. Even movies made by indigenous people can be that way. I don't know.
I'd just like to see a movie where Taylor Sheridan dies in the first 5 minutes. And like he just comes on screen and someone shoots him. Like that's it. And then the native characters go on and do stuff. Yeah, and so totally different film, but we did a review of Sinners a while back, and you and I were both like totally thrilled. You know, it starts out with the Choctaw vampire hunters, the Mississippi Choctaw vampire hunters. And like, to me, that was the best 5 minutes of the film. And damn it, Ryan Coogler needs to do a film about those guys. Like
there was a meme circulating about that.
Could we do a film about the Choctaw vampire hunters?
Yeah, what's the backstory on those guys?
Yeah, and it's okay, Ryan Coogler, you can do it. I'm down with that. An indigenous creative, great, but like let's not keep Taylor Sheridan. Let's discard Taylor Sheridan and let's go with something better and something different and something positive. There's nothing positive about that film. It's dark, it's noir, and it's
there's nothing positive about Wind River. It's like a punch in the gut over and over again.
Over and over again, and it takes the emphasis away from the hard work that activists and organizations, and particularly Indigenous women, LGBTQ, Two-Spirit people, all the work that has been done. It takes the emphasis off that and it puts it on fucking Taylor Sheridan. So like that is disgusting.
Well, that actually reminds me of something I've said many times, but from like an Indigenous feminist perspective, right? MMIW being a very important Indigenous feminist issue. Indigenous feminism is all about like the future. Indigenous feminism has an absolute faith in Indigenous futures. It's a very future-oriented project. It is about ensuring, right, that all of our relations can have a vibrant, thriving, and abundant life many generations into the future. And that we are essentially the stewards of the future right now. Our lives don't belong to us, they belong to the future. This is a very Indigenous feminist, I think, understanding of things. And so a movie ostensibly about MMIW, about an Indigenous feminist issue that is like so deeply nihilistic, is basically telling us that Indigenous people don't have a future. The declension narrative, you're born just to die. Native people are already dead. The heaviness, the bleakness, and it's just about the violence, like you said. Is it noir? Noir requires nuance, and I don't think Taylor Sheridan has nuance. So noir might not be the right word. There's art to noir. as like a type of filmmaking. And this is just
Bleak is
like,
a good word. Yeah.
it's just bleak. You know, it's really, it's anti-Indian and it's also anti-feminist, I guess is basically what I'm trying to say. It is the absolute opposite of what we do as Indigenous people, and especially as Indigenous women, when it comes to mourning and protecting our relatives and ensuring a future for our nations, and for all of our relations. And so, yeah, this film just sucks ass. It's not about Native people. It's not about MMIW.
It's about, you said it, Taylor Sheridan and his dudes circle jerking, and every one of the white male characters in there is him. And from the rapists to Jeremy Renner to, you know, the other cops, like the white cops, that's all Jeremy Renner. I mean, that's all Taylor Sheridan, and that's who he is. And that's how he moves through space as this misogynistic, toxically masculine settler, nihilist, and he just needs to go away.
I mean, a toxic masculinist settler nihilist, that's pretty much like the brand that is in power right now. That basically just describes like the US to its logical conclusion, which is what we're seeing politically in the US right now. So no wonder like Yellowstone is so popular. No wonder, you know, people can't get enough of what Taylor Sheridan does. That's not even like the US on steroids. That it literally is like the soul of America. Taylor Sheridan's work is like the soul of America, just like
it is
in
the decaying
movie
soul of America, and late stage decay is what we're seeing now. And yeah. So fuck him.
Before we wrap up, oh, go ahead. Did you say so fuck him?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nope. Before we go, I actually found the line Jeremy Renner when Natalie's brother's just like, what's this wee shit? He actually says this. This is so fucking infuriating. Jeremy Renner says, this land is all we have left. That's when he wees himself as Arapaho. And then he invokes the land and it's like, no, you didn't, motherfucker.
He invokes the land with absolutely no connection to it, other than you know, his adjacent, his Arapaho adjacent ex-wife and children. Yeah. Oh God.
Oh,
Okay.
I forgot. I mean, we're at the end, but I forgot to talk about the shootout. And like Taylor Sheridan tells a story about the maze of injustice, meaning like the jurisdictional maze of injustice that has been so like cogently written about by like Sarah Deer, the Amnesty International report that came out in the late 90s called Maze of Injustice, like how difficult it is to prosecute perpetrators of murder and disappearance and rape of Native women. But the way that he chooses to portray that in the film is through like this gunfight between all of these different, like, there's like the Department of Energy, there's like the county sheriffs, there's like the Bureau of Indian Affairs, there's like the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You know, there's like all of these different jurisdictions. And of course, like the way he tells that story is just through a bunch of them just shooting at each other. And again, it's a very Taylor Sheridan approach to something that there's no nuance. And those things are actually written about by legal experts and advocates.
And if
in
you
very
don't understand
sophisticated ways.
You just put a bunch of dudes in a circle and give them guns, big guns, and start shooting. And at one point, Jane stands up, like that's her triumphant moment. She stands up and she's like, I'm the FBI. I'm the only one here with jurisdiction. And you're like, oh God, really? But then they all start shooting at each other and everybody dies except Jane, but who once again saves the day riding in on his hi-ho silver snow machine with his white outfit. But Jeremy Renner not only shooting, but like blasting the hell out of everyone who's left. Like he doesn't just shoot them, but like he shoots and bodies fly 10 feet back. Yeah.
And he makes his own bullets. What a man.
Yeah.
What a goddamn
and
man.
he carries all this on his snow machine.
Where he goes in 80 miles an hour. Anyway,
Yeah.
I feel like we're I apologize to Arapaho folks who've been listening to this episode for the dumb comment I made earlier about horse handling and horse training and how there's like no difference between a certain kind and another kind. I don't know what I'm talking about. I grew up around horses, but I actually don't know anything about the Arapaho culture around horses. So sorry for the stupid comment.
Well, I mean, I think I grew up around horses too, and I don't know how Arapaho horse people do gentling of horses and bridles at all. It looked to me like stuff I've seen before.
Yeah. Even at like a commercial horse training facility. Anyway.
I mean, I know native people, at least the people that I've been around, and actually in my life, it's been mostly Diné or Apache people, gentle their horses in a lot different ways than white cowboys do. White cowboys, they break horses, but that's not the way native people do it. And it looked to me like it was reasonable. But to claim for Jeremy Renner to claim that he was showing his son the Arapaho way.
That was the point I was trying to make, was absurd.
Yeah, absurd.
It was embarrassing.
It was just one of many moments where you just want to go, fuck.
Like, man, I cannot believe you had the audacity. I cannot believe you thought it was okay to like do this, to say this, to make this, to portray this. Like, no shame, man. There's no shame in Taylor Sheridan's movies.
No shame.
There's absolutely no shame. But anyway, I just wanted to say that. I just wanted to apologize for that ignorant comment I made. But that's all I got. I apologize for rambling a little bit during this. You know, it's that time of year.
It is that time of year. But no, I think I got out a lot of rage. So thank you for listening to
You were on
the
point.
rage. Last night I was like, oh man, I gotta watch this film again. And then I texted Mel and was like, yeah, I fucking hate this film. But I think it's important to talk about. And we haven't done it, and it needed to be done.
Well, hope you enjoyed this episode, folks. Elena, thank you for being so on point with this episode. We will be back probably in a couple of weeks. We're going to do a year in review episode with all of the hosts and the comrades on the podcast. So be on the lookout for that before the new year, or before the end of the year, I guess. And yeah, RPH will be back in January with a new RPH episode, not a crossover episode with the other hosts. And yeah, we will see you then. Stay warm, everyone.